Hi, I'm Barb.
Hi, I'm Pat.
Pat and I have a lot of interesting conversations.
Yes, and we thought you might like to listen in to our podcast that we've called Coffee House Inspirations.
We hope you will enjoy our topics.
Good morning, Barb.
Good morning, Pat. How are you today?
I'm pretty good. I had a little bit of a shortened sleep last night. I woke up for some odd reason, which I do not know. But I got back to sleep, and I think I'm awake, but we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah. And how about you? How are you doing?
No, same. Yeah, pretty good. Just looking out the window at the branches blowing out there. So it's pretty windy out today. I'm noticing the buds are getting bigger, so we'll have leaves soon.
Hey, and you're only 4 days away from a COVID vaccination, right?
Yes.
Are you excited?
On Monday.
Are you excited?
I am considering that I had to cancel my last one.
So we're vaccinated, and it was there was really no residual reaction. My arm was a bit sore. I had a little smidge of a headache, but it was really not much beyond that. So I'm sure you'll be fine, and I can hardly wait to hear about it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, so we've decided that we're going to take a shot at explaining what tapping is. And so, you and I have both been studying this for a while, have been practicing it too. And so I wanted to just, if you're okay with that, I would just like to give a little bit of a kind of an introduction for those who don't really know what tapping is.
Mm-hmm.
And so that we can have a little bit of a background, and then we can play around with the idea a bit.
Okay.
So the first person to introduce this into the Western culture was a man named Dr. Roger Callahan, and he was a clinical psychologist in the US, and in the late 70s, early 80s, I believe. And he was doing a lot of work with people who had phobias of varying kinds,
Mm-hmm.
or had phobias about flying, people who had phobias about water, people who had phobias about just being outside or eating certain things, and he also had a practice that encompassed a lot of people with just general psychological issues that were coming up and whatnot. And he was working with a woman who had a strong phobia about water. And he was working with her in the traditional way, like, exposure therapy, like get in the water, deal with your anxiety, and it just wasn't working. And it didn't matter which, he used a little hypnotherapy, he was using talk therapy, and she remained just petrified of the water. So he was working with her one day and just asked her to just tap on her thymus a little bit, where the thymus gland is at the center, just below the collarbone center of the chest.
Mm-hmm.
And she started to smile a little bit and said, I don't feel quite so scared. And he had done that because he had at some point been looking at the meridians in Chinese acupuncture and acupressure.
Mm-hmm.
And where these meridians were in the body and how they carried the energy, they called it qi, along these meridian lines through the body, and that each one affected a different gland or a different organ or something of that nature. And that in the acupuncture, that using the needles, they would try and center on where they thought the meridian was that was being impacted, et cetera, et cetera. So he was just suggested this tapping thing on her thymus, and she started to feel a little relaxed. But she said, I still feel really sick in my stomach when I get anywhere near water. So he said, so he did a little research and looked at the meridians where this, that, and the other were, and found the meridian that went into the stomach area. And he started tapping with her on that. And the fear that was held in this space in her stomach just disappeared.
Wow.
And they did the same procedure for a couple of weeks, and within a couple of weeks she was swimming.
Oh.
Was able to take her children swimming because she was so afraid of the water that she wouldn't let them go anywhere near the water when she was around or whatever. And so he really started to take a look at this and wonder what the heck is going on. And so after a certain amount of research and looking at the way that the meridians were established in the body and the kind of the effects that it would have in the mind and in the release of these situations, or he called them fields of energy in the body,
Hmm.
and started using it with his patients and was discovering this huge relief in short periods of time that he hadn't been able to achieve through, the other kinds of therapy that he was doing. So he really made it for the remainder, I think, of most of his professional life. He focused on this thing that he called thought field therapy.
Okay.
And that was based on the idea that there were pockets of energy in the body that were often a result of trauma, and they were not resolved, so it stayed in the body. And he just started looking at what they call the algorithms or the recipes, the tapping recipes using certain acupressure and acupoints, settings on the body.
Hmm.
Because they all these acupressure and acupuncture points end up on the external as well as the internal. So they're lines that run through the body, but they manifest somewhere, so you can actually tap on them. And so he called this, this thought field therapy, and used it in his practice there on in, and taught many people about it and the different recipes there, or the different points to tap it, get it different things and that sort of thing, and to release. And so he developed a protocol, and during the time that he was working upon this, he came across a fellow by the name of Gary Craig, who wrote the book that we both have in our hands called the EFT Manual.
Right.
And he changed some of the language, and he with Dr. Callahan's approval, and from the thought field therapy to emotional freedom therapy, EFT, which became known as tapping.
Hmm.
And there's two. I just wanted to read a couple of things because they're quite similar. So each of them sort of developed an overriding statement about the procedure itself and the practice.
Okay.
And what Dr. Callahan said, that the thought therapy, the thought field therapy is a treatment for psychological disturbances, which provides a code that when applied to a psychological problem the individual is attuned to, will eliminate perturbations. That's just, upsets in the field, like perturbed.
Hmm.
Perturbations in the thought field, the fundamental cause of all negative emotions. This code is elicited through thought field therapy. It's casual diagnostic procedure through which the thought field therapy algorithms or recipes, just following procedure, were developed.
Hmm.
So he basically said that the disruptions in the thought field are the fundamental cause of all negative emotions, because they establish a place in the body. And if you aren't aware exactly of what the kind of hidden emotion is, or the established emotion is in the body, and how to access it, can sit there for years and eventually cause all sorts of other disturbances. And then the way that Gary Craig in the EFT manual describes it, and he calls it a discovery statement, but it's an overriding statement, which is at the beginning of chapter 2. And he says that, and this is the way they describe it, the cause of all negative emotions is a disruption in the body's energy system.
Wow.
So the premise then is that there are disruptions in the body's energy system.
Hmm.
And the idea of thought field therapy or emotional freedom technique is to find the algorithms or the recipe for tapping that gets to the meridians in the body where these emotions and disruptions are held. So does that make sense so far?
Yes. I mean, is there like the different recipes? I suppose we'll probably get to that, but I'm just wondering if there. Well, I'll just let you continue on there.
Yeah, they're probably more basic and defined in the EFT manual, because what Dr. Callahan did was he went a little further into the meridian system and started going into areas on the hands and on the arms and that sort of thing, where he was trying to develop an algorithm that got more directly to a very specific thing. And
Okay.
what Dr. and when this, he is not a doctor. Actually, Gary Craig was actually an engineer by profession, which I found hilarious. But it makes sense because, you know, engineers are always looking for a logical reason for things happening and how do you get to that right away and fix it.
Yeah.
And so in the EFT manual, it's more of a generalized tapping structure that, or recipe that gets to the most common meridians in the body, the most prominent, I guess that I would say the most prominent meridians in the body. And so there's the recipe then is then probably what we'll talk about today, because it's actually so simple. And you and I have both had experience of using this, and I've got a couple of things that I'd like to mention that were really game changers for me using tapping as I understood it. And so the very first thing that is required in the tapping is to define what the problem is.
Great.
So let's say that you've got a problem where you're afraid of mice.
Good example.
And those of you who are listening, if you heard one of our podcasts, I think it was on
Anxiety
and triggers and all that sort of stuff. Barb's issue with mice came up a couple of times, so we might use that as a starting point for this.
That's actually a good idea.
Yeah, so it has to be practical. It has to be practical, and it has to be doable, and it has to be usable and accessible. Mm-hmm. So we're going along with the premise that the cause of all negative emotion is a disruption in the body's energy system.
Okay.
So that's, if you're kind of following through, that's on the EFT manual on page 80. Yeah. So what we're looking at is just that you have a disruption in your energy system around being able to deal with mice. Okay. Great. So then you have to start, when you're starting out with this, you have to take a subjective measurement of what that level of fear is, so that when you're proceeding into this, you have to know whether it's working or not. So if you were to sit with that idea for a minute of the mice, what would you say your level of discomfort is? And you have to start at 1, which is nothing, and 10, which is the most afraid you could possibly imagine being, and pick a number.
Okay. Okay. It's gone down tremendously since the last episode, and I think it's just because of, of time, because it was 10 for quite a while. But I would say probably now it's let's go with maybe perhaps 4 or 5 in that area.
Okay, and we're going to use that because one of the things that I've come to understand is, because it's a subjective assessment, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. What matters is what do you feel about it? So when you say 4 or 5, we're going to go with that because that's your subjective assessment, and that's what's real for you.
Okay.
So then you have the fear of mice is this kind of disruption in your energy system. Because you're not afraid of rabbits.
Well, I'm not really afraid of mice either. It's just the fact that they're They're in my room. They're, you know, and it's usually at night. Even if it was during the day, it wouldn't bother me so much. But it's at night. It's dark. You're seeing shadows running across the floor. So yeah.
Well, let's redefine that a little bit then, so it's a little bit more accurate. That there's a level of fear of them being in your room at night.
Yes, I would. Yes.
That's more getting right at it.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that Dr. Callahan and Gary Craig both talk about, as does Nick Ortner, because we'll talk about him as well, is that you have to define what you perceive the problem to be at a certain level of absolute accuracy.
Okay.
Don't BS yourself. Don't downplay it. Just go right for what it is.
Okay.
And don't overthink it. So that's the perturbance in the thought field that we're going to be looking at, is this fear of mice in the dark in your room and where they're going to go and what they're going to do, sort of thing. And you're at between a 4 and a 5. So then the other thing that they developed was they called it a psychological reversal, because it's trying to clear from the mind that this isn't possible to resolve. Because, you know, we get into these things and go, I'll never get any better. This is the worst thing ever happened to me. I'm going to So the psychological reversal is to open a spot in your consciousness that allows for this is not the worst thing in the world and I'm okay. So it would be something like that you would say, even though, and we'll do the tapping points in a minute, even though I've got this fear of mice in my room, I really accept myself and it's going to be okay. So that you do a psychological reversal, so that this emotional statement has a path to resolving itself.
Okay.
So we eliminate some of the negativity and some of that idea that we're stuck with this forever.
Okay.
So that's the kind of the setup. And so they call it the psychological reversal, or the cognitive switch, or whatever you want to call it. So then what we'll do is we'll just describe as best we can what this tapping algorithm is going to look like, or this recipe is going to look like. So I'll do my best to describe the body parts and how we're going to do the tapping. And with the tapping, you don't have to tap so hard that you're going to knock yourself over. You just do, I always use my index finger and my middle finger to tap on these areas. And so just kind of, and to kind of arrange that, people have a tendency to use their dominant hand, which is good because it's kind of the one we're more familiar with and more accurate on. And so first we're going to do the psychological reversal. And when we do that, we're going to tap those two fingers from your dominant hand to your not dominant hand on that fleshy part that we call the karate chop, where it's right below your little baby finger and just above your rib. That soft.
Yeah. If you were to karate chop someone, that's the area.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we're going to, my watch is talking to me. Sorry, I'm going to take it off. So we're going to start with psychological reversal. So we're going to do it 3 times so that that has an opportunity and a chance to kind of, move into our consciousness. So let's start at this day. Even though I have this fear of mice in my room at night.
I have this fear of mice in my room at night.
I completely and fully accept myself.
I completely and fully accept myself.
Okay. And even though I have this fear of mice in my room at night.
I have this fear of mice in my room at night.
I completely and totally accept myself.
I completely and totally accept myself.
And the last time is, even though I have this fear of mice in my room at night.
Even though I have this fear of mice in my room at night.
I completely and totally accept myself.
I completely and totally accept myself.
And I was just one quick thing. I was going to say, if people are wanting to tap along with us as we do this, just pick an issue for yourself that isn't the biggest thing in the world, but it's something that kind of dogs you a bit and you'd like to get a release from it. Sorry. Right. Okay, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Okay. No, my question is, why do you have to make the statement that you completely and totally accept yourself afterwards?
That is based on the idea that if we're creating a positive a positive sort of environment to work with, and we're giving messages to our body, we're wanting to accept ourselves for whatever is going on, so that in the psychological reversal, we're not judging ourselves in any way. We're okay. I accept myself. You can go, you can do anything. You can say, I'm okay, or it's okay, or I love and accept myself, or whatever the positive statement is, so that you remove the energy of judgment.
Okay. Okay. Yep.
And let's go into the tapping. So when you're tapping, you're also using those statements, that emotional kind of perturbance, and you're giving those messages to the meridians, so that you are giving the message of clearing, tapping into exactly what it is, because the body knows.
Mm-hmm.
Way more than we do. So we're going into that meridian system. So we begin at the very top of the head, and you're just lightly tapping with those two fingers, that index finger on your right or left hand, if that's what you're dominant, and your middle finger. And you're tapping, and you're saying, I'm afraid of mice in my room at night.
I'm afraid of mice in my room at night.
And what they might do.
And what they might do.
Now you move that tapping to the inside of your eyebrow, that's closest to your nose, but just to the end of your eyebrow. And you tap on that gently, and you repeat again, I'm afraid of these mice.
I'm afraid of these mice.
Can't see them.
I can't see them.
And I'm afraid of what they'll do.
And I'm afraid of what they'll do.
And then you move to the outside of that eye, just where the bone kind of comes to the eye, and just right along the eye line. And you say, I'm afraid of mice in my room at night.
I'm afraid of mice in my room at night.
I don't know where they are.
I don't know where they are.
But I believe they're somewhere.
But I believe they're somewhere running around.
Yeah, so tell it like it is.
Yeah.
And then the next one is right under your eye, at the top of the cheekbone, not in the soft part of the eye, just below the cheek, just right where the cheekbone starts.
Mm-hmm.
And you tap that gently, and you say again, I'm afraid of mice. Go ahead. You
Yeah.
Say it out.
Yeah. I'm afraid of mice in my room at night. I know that they're running around, and I'm not quite sure where they are.
Okay. And now you go to that space at the top of your lip below your nose. It's just that little soft part where that indent is, and continue.
I'm afraid of the mice being in my room at night. I can hear them, but I can't see them. I know that they're there though.
Okay. And then right below your bottom lip, just stay on, not at your chin, but just between your bottom lip and your chin, there's another kind of indentation where your tooth line, your jawline is, and you start.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay, and there we're tapping, and we'll go like this. I'm afraid that I'm going to miss something, that they're going to be around, that I won't see them, and I get tense. Okay, and tap that out.
Yeah, yeah, all of that.
Yeah, and then go down to let's say, because let's say you're using the right hand, so you go down just below where your collarbone starts, and just in that soft spot, not right at the neckline, but just a little bit off to the right or left, and there's a soft spot, and start tapping that, and let's give it another statement.
I'm afraid of mice being in my room at night when it's dark and I can't see them, but I can hear them.
Okay. And I'm going to assume that most of the people that would be listening to this are women, although I don't know that for sure, but most men know where this is. But so you go under your arm, and just where your bra line is, just tap there. And again, just say, I'm living with this, this fear of mice being in my room, and it disrupts me in some ways, not as much as it used to be, but I still feel the energy of it.
Yes, it disrupts, yes, and it disrupts my sleep, and
okay,
keeps me awake. Yeah.
Okay, so just sit with that for just a minute, and if anybody's tapping along, just you use whatever issue or disruption that you might have, and now sit with that, and what does it feel like now? You said it was at a 4 or a 5. What would you say about it now?
That's probably about the same, probably about 4.
Okay, So we're not going to 5. We're just kind of hanging around 4.
Mm-hmm.
So the process then is quite simple, really. That's we've sort of gone through the tapping routine, the algorithm. I don't know why I'm having a hard time getting my mouth around that. And that you just continue to do that until you start feeling some movement, because there will be movement in most cases, because the energy that is in that, that negative field in the body will slowly start to move its way out. Some
Mm-hmm.
people have results quicker than others, but it's like anything else. To make something work, you have to work it.
Right.
You have to kind of commit to the process.
And as you're doing the tapping, you're not necessarily sticking to one statement. As you're working through, you're just kind of talking it through, whatever is coming up. There's no particular set statement that you have to stick with. Am I right?
That's a very good point, because you're staying with the perceived disturbance, but you can kind of walk around it a little bit to kind of feel the aspects, because often when you do that, and you're absolutely right, because when you do that, you'll find perhaps a second issue that you hadn't even realized was there, something second.
Okay.
That you go, oh, that wasn't, because I'll just tell you a quick experience that I had with tapping. In the spring, I was getting, really severe allergies, and my eyes would swell up and get all red and sore and itchy and drive me crazy at night. And I would sort of feel a little bit of, throat constriction from the, allergies and this and that and the other thing. So I had read in one of, I think it was Gary Craig's book, where somebody was working with allergies, and I had a look at it, and they said that the initial kind of statement about the disruption, like you're tapping away, these allergies are killing me, I hate this, and blah blah blah. And I came upon an idea, and I don't know whether I came up with it for myself, or I read it somewhere, or what happened, but it said something like, nature is against me right now, and I'm kind of at war with nature.
Oh.
So this idea that there were things in the environment around me that were so dangerous and so kind of offensive, that they were, creating all this trouble for me. So I started tapping that nature was not against me, that I was one with nature. That when I'm on this planet and in this world, I and nature are coexistent. And I started tapping on that, did that for a few days, and I stopped noticing the symptoms of the allergies. They just started slowly fading away. And this is about, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years ago, and I had a symptom since.
That is amazing.
I know, it just blew me away. And it's like, I kept thinking, nah, this can't be this easy. There's gotta be something else that's going to bonk me on the head here.
And I do remember how bad your allergies used to be. I remember that. And I remember that year that you did the tapping, and they cleared up. I remember that.
Yes. So it's, I would suggest that people, if they're interested in emotional freedom technique, or the thought field therapy, as it was once called, that they do some reading. It's always better to have an overview of what you're doing, so that you get a conceptual understanding of what this is trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. And for some people, it has more success than others. But I first heard of it from Louise Hay, and I think this was in the, I don't know, late 80s. And she was just learning this emotional freedom technique, and she couldn't stop talking about it. And then Christine Northrup started talking about it, and Jack Canfield started talking about it. And you think, well, I should have a look at this and see what's going on. And so it's been around for a while. And it's the nice thing about it is that it is non-invasive. Everybody has access to it. Mm-hmm. And once you learn the basic recipe or the basic techniques, it's extremely simple.
So another question, Pat, as you're doing the tapping and talking your way through it, now, how long do you keep going? Do you keep going till there's a resolution? Do you keep going until you're just feeling better and then maybe do it again the next day? Or how far
Any and all of those things, any and all of those.
Okay,
Because you'll know when you'll know if you're feeling a little different. And I think that it's like anything else, that you have to kind of stay at it for a while to give it a good chance of getting into the body. And
okay,
I think that that the meridian system, because it's an ancient system that has been tried and true for years, and Western medicine isn't so particularly keen on it, but getting more open-minded to it. One person that I know, her family doctor, recommended acupuncture because there wasn't anything that she could do for a particular thing, and it's moving into, certainly moving into the system, and that you try different things. Like if that one particular issue is not seeming to resolve itself, try to go a little deeper. Because it's kind of like that whole system that we were talking about with triggers, is that sometimes the thing that you think is the thing is just the tip of the iceberg of the thing.
Yes, well, yes, and I was just thinking about that when you and I did that 21-day challenge, Rick Ortner's book. We did a 21-day challenge, and there were many times that we uncovered other things.
That's exactly right. And you don't know that until you start tapping away at something that you think is going on, and the next thing that happens is another thing pops into your mind. You go, oh my God, I had forgotten about that.
Yes, yeah.
I wonder if that had, and then we would tap on that and find that we were sort of having more revelations about what this disruption was than we had originally thought.
Exactly, yes.
Because the one thing that Gary Craig says is that these things are hiding. They got a home they're happy with, and you might not be happy with, but they are.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful way to just kind of like excavate them, kind of thing. As you're tapping away, they seem to be coming to the surface or revealing themselves. Or that's what I was really amazed by, that, at how many other things and insights would come during the process of the tapping.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it was a real revelation. So what I'll do is I'll just put the titles and authors of those books on the information below the podcast, so that if anybody is interested in following up or reading a bit more about it, they're free to do so, and we would encourage it, I think, for just a general kind of tool.
Oh yes, yeah.
Get stuck. So, and we're just about out of time. So we had talked last week about a little final segment that says, "What are we watching on television?"
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
So
yeah.
Let's make this your week. What are you watching, Barbara?
Well, I watched something last weekend that I enjoyed so much. I believe I watched it 4 times in a row. It was, which I never do.
Wow,
I might rewatch something, but not one after the other. And it was a music documentary, and it was called Echo in the Canyon. And it was just a documentary about the Laurel Canyon, just outside of Los Angeles, in the 60s.
And Laurel, and it was Netflix, right?
It was Netflix, yes. And which I had no idea about. So I didn't know the whole history and the story about Laurel Canyon. And I think it was 1965-ish, around that time, where a lot of these artists, these musicians, came together and just made some of the best music. It was so interesting. I enjoyed the music throughout. It was Bob Dylan's son, Jacob Dylan, that was doing the interviewing of some of these artists that are still surviving. and he has his own band called the Wallflowers, and so they would play. He's trying to pass it on to the next generation, and then the next generation still. So it was so interesting. I just loved it.
Well, that sounds very cool. And you inspired me to watch it, and I loved it. I felt like dancing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Which I might have done too. Anyway, so let's end it there. And that was fun. And it was lovely to see you, because I can
You
see
too.
her. You can only hear her. I can see her. She looks great.
Oh,
Well,
thank you for that.
and we'll convene again next week.
Okay, sounds good, Pat.
Bye, Barb.
Bye, Pat.